In this episode of Growth Unlocked, we have Justin Michael, who joins us to discuss his experience in sales coaching, emphasizing the importance of mindset and how to leverage technology to be successful in sales. Justin also shares some fascinating insights on what he thinks are the future of trends in sales, pointing towards a landscape where AI will play a really significant role in prospecting and pipeline generation. Justin also suggests that leaders should be focusing in on training, tech stack optimization, and fostering a culture of transparency and collaboration amongst teams to navigate the evolving sales landscape successfully. Hey, Justin, it's really great to have you on the show today. Welcome to the Growth Unlocked Beyond Scale podcast. It's an absolute pleasure to have you here today.
Fantastic to be here. Long time coming.
Has been. It feels like we scheduled this probably about a month or two out, but it's come around really quickly. So excited to have you on. And maybe if you want to just quickly introduce yourself. I mean, obviously we've known each other for a little while, but Justin Michael, I think you're probably best known as the guy that knows outbound better than anyone. But maybe a quick little 30-second spiel on kind of who you are and a bit about that for the audience.
Yeah, so I feel like an Australian by association, as my co-author and mentor is Tony J. Hughes down there, who's very well known. It was just April Fool's, and I put like Neuralink chipped since 2017, and nobody even questioned it. They're just like, oh yeah, obviously he has Neuralink. But I guess one of my claim to fame is I photoshopped the Terminator on my face when I released a book called Tech Powered Sales. And this famous thought leader wrote in and he said, that's a CLM, that's a career limiting move. And then the book did really well. I've been in sales for 23 years. And the first 10 years, I was very unknown and in incubator companies. And then I got a break in my early 30s and got to Salesforce, and then was in a bunch of mobile technology startups in ad tech and martech. And then I got to LinkedIn in the Empire State Building. And by the time I hit 40, I was a top VP of SaaS sales, hitting some of those rep view upper tiers of earnings, because I developed a lot of methodologies for the top of the funnel and every element of sales. And I started helping people and coaching people, and they got results. And I thought, oh, I could do this. So I went solo at 40, started a consultancy and a coaching business, and it really took off. I've worked with like 200 startups and tech companies and coached over 1,000 people one-to-one. And my techniques are very counterintuitive, subversive, just different. The purple cow, zig where others zag. And it's all based on neuroscience, game theory, relationship dynamics, behavioral psychology. And lately it's really been about the mindset, because I find that if people don't have the confidence or self-image when they're getting on calls with C-levels and decision makers, there's a lot of dynamics of power that really impacts their ability to be effective. That's me in a nutshell.
That's awesome. Love that. And that's actually a really good segue into what I was keen to dig into to start off with. So you spoke a bit about methodologies there, and one of the prime methodologies that people talk about that you've developed is the JMM. I'm keen to hear a bit more around that. If you could maybe explain the core principles or the tenets of that methodology and how it can be applied both from a business and a personal perspective to achieve success.
Yeah, so it all started in the last recession, 2007, and I had a commission-only sales job, which I elected to do. I guess I was 27. I was young enough to think, well, I'll wing it, right? And I couldn't get anyone to stay on the phone. Everyone already had this fundraising SaaS tech. I'd say, I have this piece of fundraising software, and they'd say, we already have it. So I started waterfalling. I would call the person's boss and get delegated down. So I came with this idea of routing when opening phone calls. And I also was reading Dale Carnegie and a lot of self-help. So I realized if I just say the person's full name, they're going to love that, especially if it's hard to pronounce. So I would say Ann Kowalczyk, and she'd say Kowalczyk. I'd say, oh, okay. And then, who's in charge of your fundraising? And she'd say, I am. Or if the data was bad 30% of the time, Chuck is. So I was getting all these referrals out of the top script. Now, fast forward, what is it now, 15 years later, people like Luke Ruffing at Pandadoc, he just starts using Route. He goes to President's Club for 3 years. I also trained a rep down on the Australian exchange, dialing into cybersecurity, impossible CISOs to reach. And he was holding out with the old method, why you, why now, where you say, hey, the reason for my call. He changed to mine. He got 6 meetings with CISOs on the ASX in one day. So that's where it started, was that cold call problem, because back in the day, that's what we had. But then email came and sequencing came and social selling came. And I started to realize that It's like Earl Nightingale. If everyone does it one way, you have to do it the opposite way. And now there's been so much research by Jeremy Donovan over at Sales Loft, who did 6 million emails anonymized testing. Lavender has done testing. And it really confirms writing hyper short emails, it's 60% higher conversion. So I got into this thing called heuristics in the method, which is like the meta framework over linguistics. And it's stuff like you say thank you in email, it's a gratitude heuristic. You send an image and you ask for an opinion, that's an opinion heuristic. So I started to build frameworks and formulas over linguistics in communication. So there's really 7 pillars of the system. And all you have to do is take every element of the top funnel and question it. 1, targeting, trigger events, time management, reimagine that. 2, email, one-off emails, sequences, reimagine that. Cold calling, openers, rebuttals, reimagine that. Visual prospecting, video prospecting, Venn diagrams, right? And then ChatGPT, where you can get really deep on systems like clay.com and ocean.io, and you can go into smart lead and instantly, and you can build out 5 domains and go crazy with this stuff. But for me, any AI you're using, the problem with it is it's programmed to be too nice. So when you use AI to do your message, it's like, Kieran, congrats on your new job and the headcount growth. Want to buy a CRM? And that wouldn't work in any interpersonal relationship, right? It wouldn't work in dating. You're not going to create desire by being like overreachy or too hungry with people. And so that's really the problem with AI is it's sort of like homogenizing like good milk. It's like all the messaging, I can just see the GPT. So I write about this in my books. I just released a series, Justin Michael Method series of bestsellers, starting with Sales Superpowers, that goes really into all these methods if you don't have huge budgets for sequencer tech or tech stacks, which is what Tech Powered Sales was about.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think you've touched on a pretty key point there, which most people would have probably come across at some stage. I mean, the blessing and the curse of AI with it being, so accessible is inboxes are getting spammed and all the messaging is starting to sound the same. It's all homogenous. It's all starting to sound a bit generic. And what I love about what you spoke about there before is understanding and learning the heuristics to have a framework to apply these methodologies so you can use your own style, you can inject your own personality into the messaging, which is what's really important.
Yeah, so there's been this battle of you do personalization at scale, and I was the first to say you do relevance at scale, right? But I think it's like a pyramid at the very high levels. If I'm trying to get to the CEO of HubSpot, not going to happen. I can't send 27 touches, right? An executive assistant is going to block that. But hyper personalization is I might see the CEO of HubSpot give a speech, give a talk at the kickoff or on YouTube, and I might listen at minute 14 where there's a really interesting revelatory point, and I tie that to my tech. And I did this, right? I was the CMO of Marriott. I read a quote by her in Wired magazine about keyless mobile apps and geofencing, and I had a tech to improve it. And it was a Friday afternoon, I think like 7 p.m. somewhere on the East Coast, just left a voicemail, sent an email right after, and the quote was in the subject line, and boom, I got a response in 5 minutes, got sent to London, got sent to Texas, got an on-site. So it's pretty incredible the power of not using the AI and looking for something the machine couldn't find. And your brain can scan a LinkedIn profile and find that insight and that synthesis really quickly.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so true. It's really interesting, that concept of personalization versus relevance, and I think that's something that a lot of people struggle to find that mix. So yeah, it definitely takes time to get that right. I guess switching gears a bit, Justin, keen to explore a bit more around the journey in terms of how you got to where you are today. Do you mind sharing a pivotal moment in your career that may have fundamentally changed your approach to coaching or doing business? And that's something that's helped to kind of shape your current philosophy around what growth and scale looks like.
Yeah, so I mean, I think there was a variety of things that led to ultimate success. One was willingness to change location, and I know not everyone can do that, and we're in a post-pandemic world, but my move from Los Angeles to San Francisco, I ended up going to St. Louis, going to New York, going to Seattle, and I was a bit of a gun for hire and mercenary because I had no college degree, so I got spit out by the algorithm. I reached out in my early 30s to learn the craft from the old guard. Tony Hughes, right? He sold for Sugar CRM and been a country manager for APAC, OpenText, Hummingbird, and had an amazing record of doing 7 and 8 figure deals, even with the government. So that was a tremendous learning experience diving into Jim Holden and new power-based selling, Miller Hyman, strategic selling, Jeff Toll, mastering the complex sell, and Mike Bosworth. And Mike's been a mentor and friend. He's a living legend. So going and looking into the past, there's a lot of wisdom. And I think sometimes new generations discard that as like, oh, that's musty old ideas that doesn't work anymore, or what's the modern thing? But the brain hasn't changed and the psychology is the same. Then, when I got to Silicon Valley, when I turned 31, I did a lot of visualization and mindset techniques. I'm listening to the Arnold Schwarzenegger audiobook right now. I really had a vision that I wanted to be a top enterprise rep. And so I got a job offer for the same amount of money I was making before. That's the only offer I got. And I rejected that. And I waited, and through some investors, I got hired at causes.com working for Sean Parker because I refused to settle for the same reality as the one I had. And it was an instant giant pay jump for me to 6 figures. And that ultimately led to getting to Salesforce. Now, I love the Go Giver and Bob Berg. I listened to his interviews. When I was trying to get hired in Silicon Valley, I probably got turned down for 5,000 jobs because I didn't have the college degree, and back then that mattered. So I helped my friend, who was a VP of sales, my first VP in telemarketing when I was 21, get a gig and get hooked up with some recruiters. He landed at an email service provider called Lyris. He ended up going to Indianapolis to ExactTarget. ExactTarget became the Salesforce Marketing Cloud, acquired for $2.5 billion. And then he hired me just off the strength of the sales skill, the sheer sales skill he'd seen when I was a kid. And that's how I literally got the lucky break. So by giving and networking and helping other people get roles, it created this feeling of reciprocity. And every jump in income that I've made upward to the 7-figure range has just been about serving and giving away more. I get up every day, and everyone I talk to, I just try to help. So, if you buy my book and it doesn't blow your mind, I'll buy it back. And that's real.
And that's the thing that I noticed about you early on when we started connecting, was that you give away so much for free. Like, before you were like, I mean, obviously you've been publishing books for a while, but the open source nature of the IP and the ideas you have was out there on the web. Like, you weren't trying to charge anyone for it, and people were getting a lot of value from that kind of stuff. So that law of reciprocity, however you say it, was even true back then. So yeah, I've definitely noticed that, and I think that's potentially what's kind of got you to where you are today, is just giving and serving and being in the service of others.
It's really true, right? And my personal brand, because of the robots and AI, is really loud online, right? But I run a 1,000-year-old business. I just sit with one person, try to transform their life, one team, really try to customize what I'm doing. I was very inspired by Radiohead, actually, the old alternative band from the 90s, because they finally did a record and they gave it away for free, but it was a huge commercial success because everyone donated to it. So I put all my codexes, my guides or cheat codes on Reddit, and stadiums full of people downloaded it. And it's gotten to the point, almost like Eddie Van Halen with the 2-finger tapping, where a new email guru will start putting out all this stuff. I'll say, hey, thanks for using my material. They're like, oh no, I this is my stuff. And I'll show them my guides back from 2017, 2020. And they go, oh yeah, your stuff looks like a lot of the stuff out there. I'm like, yeah, but I put it out 4 years ago. So the feedback loop is so crazy that people are using my material at scale and don't even realize it's me. And there's a downside to that because I can't protect the IP. But this is sales techniques. We're not making NVIDIA chips, right? And what happened is it just made the Justin Michael method go really wide. And worldwide is very well known now. And as a result of that, I'm able to do some really great custom work and work with people. I've also really developed as a coach, and I'm not just a tactician. I'm doing a lot with mindset and career progression. I'm helping people launch side hustles, which is 40% of reps. There's like 10 million, 11 million sales reps worldwide in tech. And they're doing a lot of advisories for equity. A lot of them just aren't getting paid, and they could be, in a non-competitive way.
Yeah, it's such an interesting topic, and something that might be quite contrarian to how a lot of typical marketers and businesses have thought when it comes to lead generation and, demand creation in the past is, let's create all this content, let's make it gated. People have got to give us their details, email address, phone number, etc. So we want to like pull people into our funnel that way, and then we want a sales team chasing them down, SDRs, BDRs, calling and sequencing these people to try to get a meeting. But a lot of that stuff is changing, right? And I think that brands need to really think about how they put out a lot of goodwill in the market, give things away without expecting anything back in return. And, you might not see immediate results, and that is playing the more medium to the long-term vision, right? Thinking about the next 2 to 5 years as opposed to straight away.
Yeah, so Michael Hyatt wrote a book called Platform, and it really was the basis. I have, 3 book deals, but by building this network of, 50,000 plus audience, I've been able to attract book deals and have a platform and a distribution model. And I credit that a lot to my co-founder, Julian Nimchinsky. We have one of the biggest B2B networks, GTM networks, which is called Hype Cycle. It's becoming Hard Skill Exchange, which is this networked coaching marketplace. And it didn't have a monthly fee. Everyone could just join it. If they badge their profile, they could watch this huge archive of 350 live GTM games, CXO games type things. So same concept, right? And Hormozy says it, just, give away the methods, sell the implementation. So, the book is not necessarily the moneymaker unless you're, Pressfield or Stephen King. It's really to get all the methods really wide, and then people come to me for the customization and tailoring. And quite frankly, the soft and hard skills. I mean, you get the right dialer in place and you get clean data. Now we're having 20 conversations a day. Right? Average reps who don't have the right tech stack are doing 5 conversations a week. But if you put in the right tech stacks, you could be doing 20 conversations a day. And then you have the bigger problem, which is existential. It's like, wait, how do I open the call? How do I handle the objections? How do I position the product? How do I peel the onion and get to real pain? And now we're, as tech-powered sales stated, if you fully embrace TQ, technology quotient, you will return to an era of innocence where we're just talking to people. Every sale happens human to human inside a conversation. But the books have been massive. Like my latest book, Sales Superpowers, this head of a healthcare SaaS, this SVP, ordered like 250 copies, which was awesome to see. And it's really been getting out there.
It's awesome. Yeah, you really deserve it. You've just been putting out so much value to the market, and it starts to come back around, which is awesome. You spoke before around the fact that you do a lot of coaching. I think you said over 1,000 people you've coached one-to-one, which is pretty impressive. You coach salespeople, managers, execs. From all those conversations and coaching sessions, what would you say the biggest unlocks that you've found for those people when trying to help them to unlock their full potential?
Yeah, so there's a book called Psycho-Cybernetics by Maxwell Maltz. And in some of my recent writings, I've been getting into this, Bob Proctor. So something like 95% of our lives is dictated by our subconscious mind, and our income down to the cent is highly dictated by our self-image, what we believe we can do, who we believe we are. So we don't even attract what we think about most. We attract what we are, what we believe, our identity. So there's kind of this layer cake that I put out in my books, and I want to credit people like Sid Banks and, gosh, there's so many people like Eckhart Tolle and Byron Katie and all these spiritual masters, Wayne Dyer, right? Abraham Maslow is a good example. But essentially, if we stay in the tactical layer of doing and techniques and methodologies and tactics, we only get so far. That's like the outside of the layer cake. Then a step down is thinking, right? Tony Robbins, like we're doing a 7-figure deal. We're talking to a CXO. We're going, gosh, I'm not good enough. I don't think I can close a sale. So you got to get the head trash right, as Sandler used to say. But then deeper down is identity, who we're being. So if we're living in service to other people, think about like the orange seed becomes an orange tree, not an apple tree. But I'm living in service to be customer centric, and somebody comes on the phone and is a-hole to me. Well, they might just be having a bad day. Rather than me take it personally, I almost feel empathy, and it just goes right off my back. It doesn't sting me. I don't feel rejected. I'm like, wow, this person doesn't know me, is fighting this battle. So like your identity and who you decide to be deep down, right? If you feel like I'm not a top performer and I really can't do the sales thing, you're almost like brainwashing or hypnotizing, blocking those outer shells. And we see this in sports and athletes and people that visualize before the game. And, whether it's Conor McGregor up to Michael Jordan, you got to get your mindset right, but your identity, right? If your identity is to make 200K, I train you on all these techniques and you have a 350K year, it's called the upper limit problem. Hendricks, you will self-sabotage. Your ego will say, okay, I got to do 150, and you'll make less money to make sure you're safe and comfortable. So we all do that. We all have this bizarre hedonic treadmill, hedonic adaptation, right? You hear about the couple in New York, they're making $1 million a year and they're spending 1.3 million. And the more they make, the more they spend, right? And then we have a comfort zone, an amount of money, a lifestyle. The other crazy thing is we have 70,000 thoughts a day. 90% are repetitive, with 90% are negative and 80% are repetitive. It's something crazy like that. I might be flipping those numbers, but essentially we're thinking the same thoughts. And that goes for a billionaire to a top sales leader. So if we're not our thoughts and we're not our mind and we're not our body, like what are we? We're the consciousness behind that. So one of the techniques in my method is to look at a negative thought, like I'm not good enough or I can't do that. And is that true? And question it. And that comes out of the work with Byron Katie and Sid Banks and lots of other things, but just questioning your negative thoughts and even like 50 Cent flipping them. And then having affirmations like, I can close 7-figure deals. I am winning the ladder. I am making it to President's Club, and starting to just repetitiously inject that stuff into you. And then I go into listening to special frequencies like 432 hertz and 528 hertz and doing this in a state before you sleep where your brain waves are between that focused beta alert coffee state goes into, alpha and then theta states as you relax. And that relaxed period is when Quentin Tarantino wrote the scripts. Einstein came up with inventions, Edison, right? Mozart, people compose in that state. So being able to relax, get a good night's sleep, go for a walk on the beach, put your feet in the sand, harmonize with nature, get your frequency right. I love that about you. You're always traveling, always seeing the world. That's going to help your sales career better than just sitting and drinking coffee and reading books and stressing out,
Absolutely. Yeah, you've touched on some really key points there, and I think it's a lot of it is around the self-limiting belief and these perpetual thoughts that are going through your mind. But I think you've given some really practical examples of how you can kind of break out of those patterns. Simple things like going outdoors, spending time, in the park, fresh air, sand between your toes, spending time with your loved ones. Like these are the kind of things that I think sound simple to do, but a lot of people forget about them, right?
It's true. There's this voice. I mean, you should read this book called War of Art. Really good by Pressfield. It's an amazing book. But there's this resistance or voice in our head that's always going, and you can solve it with therapy because a lot of it comes from trauma before 7, and it's a good thing to do. But you can also solve it through market validation. So how do we build our self-esteem and our self-belief? Well, to silence the voice, start using your own voice and reprogram yourself with positive affirmations and be in the right relaxed state. But number 2, market validation is as you become more confident and gain more skills in sales and you do more deals, you start to see your product or service really fulfill the ROI. So for me as a coach, I get testimonials all the time. People I've never even met come back to me and review the book or use the techniques. So if you're selling SaaS or services or you're building your own business, as you find product market fit, as you see the value realized by the customer, collect testimonials, and that will build up your confidence in your solution because sales is the transference of belief. And you could say you believe in the product, but until you sell it, someone buys it, installs it in the business, makes hundreds of thousands or 10x ROI. It's like, wow, this stuff really works. And then your belief in that is what's going to transfer when you're prospecting, when you're going out to new customers.
I love it. So good. Like off the back of that, Justin, what advice would you give to say, a business owner or even a manager or a sales leader that's really trying to get the most out of their people? Like what kind of practical, actionable advice would you give someone with all these, these ideas in mind? Like what's something that people can start to do today to really empower their people to get the most out of them?
Yeah, so I think like vulnerability, like the Brene Brown talk on Netflix is good to watch. If you as a manager are trying to be impressive to your people and show how incredible you are, and maybe that helped you get your job because of your stellar resume, but honestly, being human, getting on cold calls yourself and failing and showing new reps like, look, see how hard I just got rejected and I couldn't get out of that. I couldn't stop that hang up. When they realize that you're just like them, maybe 5 or 10 years forward, that vulnerability as a leader, and they're having trouble and telling them stories about when you did and riding along with them. And even in the virtual world now, getting something like Nooks where you can cold call with them. And in the old days, I used to sit in a chair and splice in. We literally had a cord where we had 2 sets of headsets so we could work together. I think that's the key. I think reps feel alienated or it's too sterile and they have to tell their boss the good news all the time and they can't be honest about things that scare them or terrify them in the pipeline. They have skill gaps, they have call reluctance, sequences aren't working, they need training, they need various tech, and they just kind of sit there silently because they want to go along with a team, and the manager creates that too. And the forecasting calls and one-on-one, everything's hunky-dory, but everything's broken. So when I come into these organizations, I'm shocked because they don't have clean data. 40% of the phone numbers are bad. None of the sequences are performing. There's no training. And yet everyone's talking about crushing it. And it's like the emperor's new clothes. No one can, the boss doesn't want to admit things are bad. The reps don't want to complain because then they'll get, scarlet letter as the complainer, right? You need a culture of failing forward, open, honest, transparent communication, mutual respect and trust, door open. That's from iChak Adizes. I love that quote, MTNR, mutual trust and respect. Everyone's just got to get real and be human. And we have to measure completions. If you're running a team, talk to each rep and say, how many actual human beings did you talk with, either DM flows, live fish on the line, or voice to voice last week? And I literally find it's under 5 people. And especially for AEs that are traveling, they're just bogged down with internal meetings. So I know it's an Elon Musk concept, but less meetings, more focus on getting your reps completes and live conversations.
Mm. Yeah, it's focusing on the things that matter, right? The things that are in their control, as opposed to the lagging indicators of, attainment, quota, MRR, etc., revenue. Focused on the things that are important, which are having meaningful conversations consistently, improving the quality and then the quantity of those over time.
Yeah, so Ian Koniak calls it RGAs, revenue generating activities.
Yeah, love it.
And I love the Jason Jordan book, Cracking the Sales Management Code. And revenue is a lagging indicator. You can't just keep having a 101. Where's the revenue? Where are the closed deals? Where's the pipeline? Because it's all those little actions that you have to chip away. Yeah, so you got to slow down to speed up, and you've got to do the unscalable to scale. So yeah, that's important.
Absolutely. Thinking about scaling and on that topic, I mean, some of the businesses that I've spoken to recently, depending on their maturity and sort of where they're at within their growth curve and funding and how long they've been around for, might be experiencing plateaus and some stagnation. What actionable advice could you give to go-to-market leaders that might be facing those plateaus in their business?
Yeah, I mean, there really are plateaus and you have to push through it. You have to really challenge yourself. The ego likes comfort and will stay comfortable. So it takes 21 days to create a habit, and then you're in a habitual cycle of just sending the sales email exactly the same way, doing the same cold call. You get into a rhythm, which becomes a rut. And what you want to do is push yourself out of your comfort zone, make things harder. So I used to say, do 2 things that scare you by lunch. So a lot of times people look on LinkedIn and they look at a company and they see the C-levels and the board members or the key person. They think, gosh, if I mess up this call, I'm dead in this account. Like, I'll be burn noticed, right? And what I do is get up and say, oh, you're afraid of that one? Feel the fear, do it anyway. And I love the Jack Canfield FEAR acronym, and it goes way back. I think I even quoted Mark Twain in a book, but it's future events appearing real. Like Jack Canfield was one of my early mentors. He did the Success Principles and Chicken Soup for the Soul. I had a chance to meet him a few times, and he had this equation, E plus R equals O, which is events plus responses equals outcomes. You can't control the events. Typically, you don't know if they're in a procurement cycle, they're going to RFP, if they just signed with a vendor. You can only really control your reaction to that stimulus, right? That's why attitude determines altitude. So if you really focus on just what you can control. So I call it the 55-minute LinkedIn workout. It's like in combo prospecting, 50 triples a day keeps the pip away. You have to be willing to, almost like the gym, have that consistency every day.
The piece that you spoke about there is awesome. Was it two scary things before midday?
Uh, do things, two things that scare you
Two
before
things that
lunch.
scare you before lunch. I love that. Such a simple yet effective thing. Eat the frog, right? Get that stuff done straight up in the day, and then you win the morning, you win the day.
It was interesting. I learned that from my grandfather, but I've also seen it done as the rocks and the sand metaphor, right? You have the jar, and if you add the sand first, you can't get the big rocks in. And the sand's really internal meetings, all the Slack chatter, all the multitasking. So I really love the concept of monotasking and batching. The brain hates to multitask. And I think Tim Ferriss talked about this, but don't try to get out of inbox zero. Don't get to work, have your coffee, and just start answering all your emails. Like for the first hour from 8 a.m. till 9, do voice drops, make calls, drop voice notes on LinkedIn, right? If you're going to do a lot of cold calling, you have a bad list, like spend an hour the day before building who are the targets, getting clean emails, getting clean phone numbers out of a system, maybe multiple data providers, maybe, Cognizant and Lead IQ or Lucia, Cloud Lead. That's another thing. There's data providers now that are offering pre-called, like human validated leads where they test the email and they test the phone and they tell you, okay, Kieran is an email person, right? And Jane is a phone person, and you can know the channel specific validation. It's expensive, but if you're going to call for a couple hours in a day, having data that's clean is massive.
That might explain why I get so many phone calls when I pick it up and I say, "Hey, this is Kieran," and they just hang up straight away. It's probably people
Yeah,
like that in the background.
that's the downside of it. That's the funny thing about all this tech, right?
Indeed. Justin, moving on to our last question, it's been an awesome conversation. But one thing that I like to do is not just look back at the past and history, but looking ahead to the future, which is one thing that you're excellent at doing. How do you see the landscape of sales, go to market, business growth evolving in the future? Obviously, you've spoken a lot about this through your books in the past, but what should leaders be preparing or thinking about now to stay ahead of the curve?
Yeah, so I encourage leaders to really start to look at the tech stack revolution, and there's a huge call now for consolidation, but I think that's a myopic view in the sense that you can't really consolidate down to just one vendor. Even they claim that you kind of need to consolidate where you can into one vendor and then have other best of breed tech. But there's all this cool email writing tech like copy.ai, Autobound, Reggie for leveraging AI that may not be offered at that level in your existing CRM or SEP. It could be. But to do that, instead of constantly saying, okay, we're scaling, let's add 5 headcount or 10 headcount, drop a headcount or two, then invest an extra 1,000 ahead, 5,000 ahead, right? Train them on traditional strategic sales training, full cycle for everyone, including the SDRs, so they know how to qualify and understand, pain and developing latent pain. Number 2, get the tech stacks in place so it's really investment in RevOps, but then get training on that so there's adoption and utilization and people know how to use AI to personalize email or create sequences or use these cold calling technologies. Even simple dialers, right? There's advanced ways to use them, like taking the notes and follow-ups. There's a lot of sophistication to using it right. As far as the future of sales, right, it's going to get noisier and noisier. We have robocalls, we have spam cannons. So co-selling and partner-driven selling. The idea of finding other sellers, like going to, the HubSpot events and finding people that sell to similar customers and seeing the overlap database. So these technologies like Reveal and Crossbeam, where they can show you sets of opportunities in 2 CRMs and the overlap and control that so it's still confidential. A kind of partner and ecosystem idea. And then it's like dark social, Slack channels and communities and one-to-one. At the end of the day, I'd say like the most powerful thing you can do is just be human and not automate it all. Just write things that look like text messages, reach out to people in a way that's jarring. It's just not, hey, Bob, noticed that. Hope you're doing well. That's how you stand out now. I love stuff by like Stu Heineke and Dale Dupree, where you send funny things in the mail like cartoons. I had a client who's sending cutting boards and saying, can I carve out some time? People send just a shoe. Can I get my foot in the door? Like this hilarious gimmicky stuff works. So you got to be really creative, and the creativity is how you beat the AI.
It's got so much, so many gold nuggets in that, and you're definitely speaking my language there when it comes to partnerships and ecosystems. Yeah, Reveal is a really interesting technology, but I think when you boil it down, it's being creative, being a human, and that's the stuff that AI is not going to do, right? At least not for now.
Yeah, and I think the government would regulate it. It was John Gerard who brought this up to me. Is sort of like you have Surgeon General's warning on a pack of cigarettes or explicit lyrics on an album. If you have tech that can cold call somebody, they just banned that in the US. But if it can send an email that passes the Turing test, it'll literally say, like, sent from Superhuman, it'll say sent from Justin Michael's AI. Right? So I think it'll get regulated to indicate. And you know what? I wouldn't mind that, because if I get a perfectly personalized email and it comes from AI and they're honest, that honesty is even better. And that's like the opt-out link when you're sequencing, opt out, right? So we're going to live in this future where artificial intelligence is on the buying side and the selling side, and it's happening at the speed of a nanosecond. So the buyers put out, an all points bulletin, like, here's the type of tech I want to buy. And the sellers send out AIs, and it's like the Matrix or high frequency trading. The AIs talk, right? I can envision a world where you sit down in your CRM, like you open HubSpot, and it says, okay, who do you want to talk to? Swipe right, swipe left, picks the ICP, and then it just goes out and prospects for you and talks to the other AIs and just brings back data. And that's kind of Thomas Tungu's, the CRM of the future. It won't just be a data collection mechanism. It will actually go out and create opportunities and generate pipeline. And that's been the clarion call since doing Outbound Works, and what led to tech-powered sales is, can we fully automate the top of funnel? And the only blocker now is that LinkedIn's API isn't really open. There's a lot of scraping now, but because the systems don't all integrate, there's closed and walled gardens, you can't fully automate the top funnel in a really human way. So the human can still beat the agency automators. It's because they can apply a level of effort to the tailoring into what I call hyper P, that hyper personalization, and that's where you can win on the margin.
Such good advice, and yeah, it totally makes sense. Justin, thank you so much for your time. Really have had an absolute blast getting you on the show. Thank you for all your insights and all the expertise you brought today. If people want to connect with you, how can they do it? Where's the best place for them to find you or follow you?
Yeah, just Justin Michael on Amazon or on LinkedIn. And follow hardskill.exchange. We've got a great new one-to-one coaching marketplace. And I'd love to connect. Book reviews are gold. I don't incentivize them, but always love candid feedback on how the techniques are working for you.
Awesome. Appreciate it, Justin. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Kieran.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Growth Unlocked Beyond Scale. If you enjoyed the show, it would really be appreciated if you can leave a 5-star review wherever you consume your podcasts. And while you're there, why not subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes? If you'd like to learn about how to drive profitable scale in your business, gain clarity on your direction, and improve your business valuation, click the link in the show notes to connect with Kieran.